Hey everybody, and welcome to another live stream. We got two live streams going on today, and this first one is going to be just me, and I want to cover a topic that I haven't covered in a while, so I wanted to revisit it because I think that with anything, the more we use knowledge and skills that we have, the better we get at them, and the less they atrophy. So I wanted to jump back into a topic on Git version control. One of the nice things about Git is that there's a lot of opportunity to practice new techniques and tools because we use it all the time. Hopefully you use Git every single day. But today I want to jump in and talk about something specific just to workflow. And specifically we're going to talk about Git workflow. So I have some slides I'm going to pull up. And first, I'm going to talk about just some of the fundamentals of the Gitflow workflow, and then I'll just kind of show how I use it on my own projects, like right here on CraftQuest. So, what is Gitflow workflow? Well, it's a series of rules basically that were codified by Vincent Dreesen in 2010, and it basically has the goal of creating a reliable software development workflow, so that you have predictable releases. So think back if you've ever had a software release, and this could be just for deploying websites or it's software as well. But if you've had you deploy something to a server, some changes that you need to do for your company or for a client, and then there's all sorts of things that go wrong once you deploy it, and not because you didn't test it, but because there might have been other changes included in there accidentally because the branch also had other changes in it. And then suddenly you have like changes that weren't ready and they're getting deployed. And you don't really have a nice way of kind of walling off, stuff that is ready to go, not ready to go, and so forth. So the goal with the Gitflow workflow is to use Git in a way to where people can still work on parallel branches, so simultaneously work on different things, but there's still a predictable way of getting it all pushed to production in an isolated manner. So keep that in mind. The nice thing about Gitflow is that it only uses native Git functionality and tools, so you're not having to install extra software, some sort of plugin that everybody on your team would have to get up and running with. Right from the command line, if you can use Git and create branches and merge, then you can use Gitflow. So speaking of branches, Gitflow is really centered around the branching model, a naming convention, and then just some rules. And all three of those together pretty much make up the entirety of Gitflow. So we have two types of branches in Gitflow. We have main branches, and I'm going to talk about each of these separately, and then supporting branches. So the two types of main branches are ones you're probably familiar with. We have master, which when you initialize a new Git repository, you'll get that master branch automatically created. And then we have one called develop. This is one that you would have to create yourself. These are main branches, and these branches are considered to be more important than the other branches. And we'll talk about why. Because for master, this should always be production ready, release ready. Everything that is in master you should assume that is going to be deployed to the live site or to the production server as we call it. And so that means that you don't want to have anything in master that's not ready to go. So master is very sacred. And in master, the way that it works in Gitflow is that every commit to master would be considered a new release. And this is typically done with a merge commit, but it's still a commit. And every commit is considered a new release. So you're never actually working right in master. You're not committing right into master. And hopefully you're not doing that now anyway. But so no work is done right in master. You are doing all your work elsewhere and then merging those changes into the master branch so it can be deployed. So at any given time, let's say you have a server and it's a virtual server and something happens and you need to spin it down and spin up a new one, you should be able to just deploy that code from master to that new server without even thinking twice, because you know everything on master is good to go. In the Gitflow model, there are limited options for branching off master, and we'll talk about those as well. The other main branch is develop. This should only contain changes considered ready for next release. So this is kind of the place where everything gets pulled together before we would cut a new release or start a new release. And I'll show you this. I'm going to use the Tower software because I think they actually have a really nice implementation of Gitflow. And I'm going to show you this after we are through the slides. The develop branch, if you're doing like software development for like installable software, it can be a source of nightlies or integration releases for testing. And the develop branch is the source of supporting branches. So let's say we want to start a new feature. There's a feature branch, which we'll talk about in a minute. They're always created off of the develop branch. If you wanted to start a bug fix branch, it's always started off of the develop branch. And just like master, no work is done right in develop. Develop is a branch that is, because it's a main branch, you're not actually working in it. It's not like a working branch. It is one that's going to be branched from and merged into. And it's sort of the intermediary between master and all of your other secondary working branches. So for the supporting branches, we have three types in Gitflow. We have feature branches. You might be familiar with these. We typically use feature and then a slash as a way of grouping those together. We have release branches and hotfix branches. I'll talk about each of those quickly. So a feature branch, you are going to add something new to your project. You will do all of that in the feature branch. You can add, and sometimes we'll call these bug fix branches too, but these are branches where the work is actually being done. And you're typically going to do this locally only, but in some workflows, you'll want to push your feature branches to the origin server. Like if you're doing like with GitHub, where you're pushing a feature branch and then you're doing a pull request, you want that feature branch there because you need to pull request that feature branch so it can be merged into, let's say, develop when it's complete. So let's see, let me go back here. There we go. So feature branch rules. When you create a feature branch, you are going to branch back out of develop. Typically, it's a best practice. I have may here because there may be a time when you actually don't branch from develop, but that's the best practice. That way you get a good, clean working slate. Sometimes you may need to branch off another branch if that branch has stuff that you need to be there in order to do your work. However, you must merge back into develop when you're done with your feature. You don't merge into master. You don't merge into anything else. You merge back into develop when you're done. And the feature branch can have any name you want. If you use issue tracking tools like the Atlassian tools with Jira and Bitbucket, then it will create feature branches or branches for you based on an issue and kind of name it with the issue number and name, which is great to track. If you use GitHub, I don't know if you can do a similar thing, but you want to maybe do a naming convention that works for you. Feature slash and then the name of the feature is a good one, or feature underscore. Feature slash, I think, is the most common way of using it. And any GUI software that you use will typically see that feature slash and then organize the feature branch and the bug fix branches into their own folders just visually. As far as Git's concerned, they're all branches. It's just a naming convention. So for release branches, these are the branches that you use to prepare a new software release. This would also be, even if you're not shipping installable software, this could be getting ready to deploy new code to a server for a website. You can do some work in the release branch to prepare the release. If you're doing shippable software, that might be updating metadata, bumping a version number. And if you're you may have some reason to do that as well for deployed software as well. The release branch rules is that it may branch from develop. I would say that actually I always branch from develop, and if you use tools that have Gitflow built in, they typically will branch from develop. But a release branch must merge into master because that's the production ready, that's where everything is deployed from, and develop because we always want develop to have the latest as well. Develop needs to always have what master has in it, and it can have new stuff, but it has to have what master has in it too, because if you're going to be cutting a release from develop and pushing it up to production, it can't regress, right? So it has to have at least what master has. So that means you must merge a release into both master and develop. And then you should use a naming convention with release dash and then the release number, like release -1.2.0. You can also use a naming convention that uses words. Maybe you have code names for releases. So you can just use whatever naming convention makes the most sense as long as everybody on your team agrees on it. All right, so next up, hotfix branches. What are hotfix branches? These are going to be used to make quick fixes to a release. You've already released something and you get a report, hey, this thing is broken. Rather than go through the whole process of creating like a bug fix branch or a feature branch and then merging that in to develop and then doing into the master branch, we can sort of short circuit that into a hotfix branch just to make a quick release to get things back to where they need to be. And it short circuits the standard release workflow. So the rules for hotfix branches is that they may branch off master via a tag for the release. They must merge back into master and develop. And they should be treated like a release branch because you are going to then basically use that to merge into master and then push the code out to a server or, to a build tool to build it for installation. And hotfixes should have a hotfix prefix for the name, hotfix dash or release or hotfix slash, where the asterisk here would be then the release number. All right, so that's kind of like a lot of rules, but I think it's important. And I'll include these slides with the recording of the live stream. So if you're watching the recording, you can look below to see a link to the slides. You can review those. So what we see here is a illustration by Vincent Dreesen, or on his original blog post where he introduced this concept of Gitflow. And on the left, we have time from starting at the top going down and right here. And then we have sort of our feature branches, develop branch, release branches, hotfixes, and master. And you can see master just has a few commits because each commit is for a new release. So what happens here, if we can follow along a little bit, we want to start a new feature. So we branch off of develop. You can follow this arrow here, and we start a new feature. And, we make some commits and we get done. And then we say, okay, this is done. I'm going to finish it. And then that branch gets merged into develop. And then from there, whenever we're ready, we want to cut a release. We create a release branch, which is the green dot here. And then when we are ready, when the release is ready to go, then we merge that into master, and then we deploy it, or whatever the process is at that point. That's kind of how this works. If you Google or search online for Vincent's Gitflow, you should hit his blog post, and he'll have this illustration. And I'll put a link to the blog post as well, which will have the illustration, so you can see that. So this is kind of how it works. You can see we have multiple feature branches going on at once. We have a develop branch, which is just very organized. and it gets merged into the feature branches do, but it's also where we branch off to create new feature branches like this one right here. We're branching off. We're adding new features. We're making these little pink dots are commits. And then when we're done, we're merging back in to develop, cutting a release, and so forth. Here's a hotfix branch here. And you can see there was an issue here or up here with this release. So we created a hotfix and we merged that hotfix back into master when the fix is ready. And then we also merge it back into develop because we always want to make sure develop is in line with master. Develop may have more stuff than master does, but it should never be behind. It should never regress. So that's kind of how that works. All right, so these are the Gitflow steps. I'm actually going to show this to you in Actually, let me step through it here, then I'll show you in the tool. So this is all going to use the command line. So let's say our developer kicks off a new software development cycle and creates a new feature branch off of develop. So that would be git checkout -b feature / adding the widget, and then off of develop. So we're checking out and creating a new branch at the same time, just a little bit of shorthand. So now I have a new feature branch, which I've created off of develop, and I'm ready to add the widget, which is my feature. So with the new feature branch created and checked out, this developer gets to work and she starts working on her feature, commits the changes to this feature branch. Now, meanwhile, the developer's colleagues are also working on their own feature branches, coding away on their contributions to the next release or a future release. So we have, remember, work going in parallel. That was the whole idea of Git itself in the beginning, was parallel work that is distributed and can go on in different parts of the world without any central repository. So step 4, our developer is now done with her feature. She alerts a coworker to pull her changes and do a code review. The coworker gives a green light. Then they merge that feature branch into develop. So it's git checkout develop, git pull to get the latest from the origin, and then git merge. No FF is no fast forward, which is the default in Git, which means we want to merge commit because we want to signify this feature being complete and merged into develop. And then feature adding the widget. So now that the feature is in develop, it's going to be ready for the next nightly build, and it will be included in the next release. So at this point, it's in develop. This feature should be working. It should be feature complete and tested. Not sort of like, I've got it done, but I need to go revisit some things. If you still have that, you need to keep it in the feature branch. But we're assuming it's ready to go because we're in develop. So it's like, this is like staged for release basically. So the release manager, whoever is in charge of making the decision on when a deployment will happen, they go ahead and they start a new release. So we git checkout develop, we pull from origin to get the latest, and then we branch, create a new branch and check it out, and we call it, let's just say, release 1.2.0. And then the release branch is updated with any last minute changes, bumping versions, numbers, and so forth. And then we're ready to merge it into master to actually do the release. So we check out develop, we pull, and we merge. I'm sorry, we're merging into develop first before we go into master because we want to make sure that develop has this release as well. So it's always in line with what master has. And then we check out develop, we pull, we merge, again, no fast forward, and we merge the release branch in. So develop now has that merged in. And then we merge into master. Check out master, we pull, we do a no fast forward merge for release. So that release branch gets merged into master. And then we tag it as a new release. This is optional, but it's considered best practice to tag your releases. If you're actually releasing software like craft plugins, then you'll definitely want to tag those. You actually need to if you're going to use Packagist or something like that. I believe it operates based on tags. So that's the Gitflow sort of stepping through with the command line commands. All right, so after the release is in the wild, let's say there's a critical issue that comes up and they need to do a hot fix. So we do a git checkout hot fix off of master. We make our commit, And then we check out develop. We merge in our hotfix branch. So develop always has the latest and is in line with what master has. And then we check out master and merge hotfix into there, and then deploy our code, and our hotfix is done and everything is good again. And then a new release is tagged for 1.2.1 is what we're going to call it in this case. I guess it's arguable if a hotfix would have a version bump, but in this case, we'll do a version bump. And so this is that diagram again. And we basically step through a similar process as what is illustrated here. When this video is live on the site as a recording, I would encourage you to print this out or pull it up and kind of follow through the steps if it's not clear kind of what happens. All right, so now I want to look at the code, or actually not the code, I want to look at doing Gitflow in a GUI tool like Tower. So let me pull up Tower. And I'm just going to, there we go. All right, so this is Tower. So Tower is a Git graphical user interface, and it's actually one of the nicer ones. I like to do a lot of things from the command line. I think everybody should learn Git from the command line first, but once you have a mastery of it, sometimes a GUI like this can be really helpful, and especially for Gitflow. So what do we have here? Well, this is my working copy. So this is like, where changes would show. And this is my develop branch. And so what I want to do is set up a new feature branch. So up here in Tower, there's this button that will let you start features, start a hotfix, and start a release. And then you can even, using configure, you can actually configure the branches for your specific project. You might have slightly different naming conventions, and you can specify these here so Tower knows how to name the branches for you. So let's say I want to start a new feature for adding a service worker to the site. So I do start feature, and I give it a name. So I'll say offline service worker. We'll call it that. So the starting point is develop, because remember, new feature branches are always going to be branched off develop. So I do start feature. Now behind the scenes, Tower is just doing that branch creation off of develop and checking it out. So it's right here. You can see it's marked as head, which means it's the head of the repository right now, or the branch that is checked out. So now I can go into my code and make a change. And we'll just do a sample change just for the purposes of the demo. So I'll make a change in my code. That's going to appear here. I can commit it like that. And now it's done. So let's say that was the extent of my work on this feature, and I'm ready to complete the feature and move it forward in the process. Go back to my menu, I say finish feature. And the reason we have to do this is because that feature needs to then be merged into develop. So we choose the feature branch we want to finish. Tower gives us some options like always create a merge commit. That's that no FF, no fast forward option in the command line. This is checked by default, I believe, which is best practice for Gitflow. You can also do rebase instead of merge and so forth. I would just stick with the defaults. And then finish feature. So the feature is now finished. The feature branch goes away. In this case, the feature branch does not get saved or pushed to the server because it's not really needed anymore. And my develop branch, you can see, has been checked out. And now there's 2 commits. So I'm 2 commits behind from the remote server. And here is the actual commit with the change right here. And then this one is the merge commit. So this is actually showing that the merge happened, that I ended the feature, and it's now in develop. So now we have in the develop branch, we have our feature. So the next thing I would want to do, if this was ready to go, I could start a release. So we can give it a release name. We can say service workers offline or something like that. And we can start a release. Now you can see, because I'm using that release / prefix, is that Tower organizes them into sort of these pseudo folders. These are not real folders. It's just Tower's way of organizing this for us. And then, now that the release is done, I can maybe make any additional changes I need to. And then I go to finish release. And when I choose finish release, I need to give it a tag message, because it's going to automatically tag it for me. And then it's also going to then merge it into master. So we can say test release and then click finish release. And it's going to work. And there we go. So now we have master has our sample change, the actual code change. Then it has a merge commit for merging the feature into develop. And then it has a merge commit for merging the release branch into master. And this identifies now the sort of the steps and the progress of creating our new feature and releasing it. And you can see develop also now has this merge as well, which this is the release branch is merged back into develop. And if you can follow these lines of the branching and merging to see how everything works. So that is the kind of the basics of how Gitflow works. You can do it from the command line. You don't need to purchase a tool to do it. I think that the Gitflow support that they have in Tower is actually pretty nice. I was hesitant to use it because I think that the command line is just faster. But in this case, because I'm using the Gitflow feature every single day for every project almost, that it just makes sense to spend a little bit of time in here. It makes creating those branches and doing the merges way faster and way less prone to error than it would be if I did it from the command line. All right. Well, I hope that you got a lot out of that. We will be back shortly for another live stream. And if you want to watch the recording of this, it'll be available for premium members starting, I'm not sure when that'll be up, but it'll be available. There'll also be links to all the resources that you need to learn more about Gitflow. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next live stream.